December 1967. NBC Studios, Burbank, California. The Dean Martin Show was filming its Christmas special in front of a live audience of 300 people. Everything was going according to schedule. The comedy sketches were landing. The celebrity guests were charming. Dean was doing what he did best, making it all look effortless. Then, during a commercial break, a stagehand approached Dean with a piece of paper. It was a song request. A simple one. Little Ole Wine Drinker Me, one of Dean's recent hits. Easy enough. Dean glanced at it, nodded, and handed it back. But when the cameras started rolling again, something happened that nobody expected. Dean didn't just sing the song. He transformed it. He improvised. He played with the lyrics, connected with the audience, and turned a 3-minute novelty song into something magical. By the time he finished, the studio audience was on their feet. The orchestra members were smiling in amazement. The producers in the booth were frantically signaling to keep the cameras rolling. And Dean Martin? He just shrugged, took a sip from his ever-present glass, and said, "That's amore." What happened in those 5 minutes would become one of the most legendary moments in television history. Not because of special effects or elaborate production, but because of pure, unrehearsed talent. Before we show you how Dean Martin turned a simple request into television magic, hit that like button and subscribe. This is a story about real talent, spontaneous genius, and why some performers can never be replaced. Comment if you remember watching The Dean Martin Show. The Dean Martin Show phenomenon. By 1967, The Dean Martin Show had become one of NBC's biggest hits. It had debuted in 1965, and within 2 years, it was consistently ranking in the top 10 shows in America. This was remarkable because Dean hadn't wanted to do a TV show at all. Television is too much work, Dean had told his agent. I like performing live in Vegas. TV means rehearsals, schedules, doing the same thing over and over. That's not me. But NBC made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Not just money, but creative control. Dean could structure the show however he wanted. Minimal rehearsals. No multiple takes unless absolutely necessary. He could drink real alcohol on camera if he wanted, though most of the time it was apple juice. Most importantly, the show would be built around Dean's personality. Laid back, spontaneous, and fun. The format was simple but effective. Musical numbers, comedy sketches, celebrity guests, and Dean being Dean, charming, slightly tipsy-seeming, making everything look easy. But what made the show special was that it felt unrehearsed, like you were watching Dean and his friends just hanging out. Dean would show up an hour before taping, producer Greg Garrison later recalled. Most stars spent all day rehearsing. Dean would glance at the cue cards, do maybe one run-through, and then we'd tape. And somehow it always worked. He had this natural talent that you couldn't teach. The secret was that Dean Martin was actually a perfectionist who hid his preparation behind an effortless facade. He studied every song, knew every comedy bit inside and out. But he made it look like he was making it up as he went along. That spontaneity, real or manufactured, was what audiences loved. The Christmas special pressure. Christmas specials were a big deal in 1960s television. They were the highest-rated shows of the year, watched by families across America. Every major variety show host, Ed Sullivan, Andy Williams, Perry Como, went all out for their Christmas episodes. NBC had high expectations for Dean's 1967 Christmas special. They'd brought in big-name guests. Frank Sinatra was scheduled to appear, along with several other celebrities. The budget was larger than usual. The set was decorated elaborately with Christmas trees, fake snow, and twinkling lights. But Dean approached it the same way he approached every episode, casually. While other hosts would spend weeks planning every detail of their Christmas specials, Dean showed up a few hours before taping and said, "What are we doing tonight?" His casualness drove some of the staff crazy, but producer Greg Garrison understood. Dean's gift was spontaneity. If you over-rehearsed him, if you made him do everything perfectly, you killed what made him special. You had to let Dean be Dean. The challenge was balancing Dean's improvised style with the technical demands of television. The orchestra needed to know what songs they'd be playing. The lighting crew needed cues. The camera operators needed to know where Dean would be standing. But Dean hated being pinned down to specific marks on the floor or rigid timing. "Just follow me," he'd tell the camera operators. "I'll give you something good." The song request tradition. One of the Dean Martin Show's unique features was that Dean would sometimes take song requests from the audience. Not every episode, but often enough that people knew it might happen. A stagehand would go into the audience during a commercial break, collect requests on pieces of paper, and Dean would pick one or two to sing. This wasn't entirely spontaneous. The orchestra had sheet music for most of Dean's popular songs, and they could usually follow along if Dean chose something familiar. But it gave the show an unpredictable quality that audiences loved. You never knew what Dean might sing or how he might sing it. On this particular December evening, the Christmas special was running smoothly. Dean had performed several rehearsed numbers. Frank Sinatra had done his segment. The comedy sketches had gone well. They were ahead of schedule, which almost never happened. During a commercial break, about 2/3 through the taping, Greg Garrison approached Dean. "We've got 8 minutes to fill. Want to take a request?" Dean shrugged. "Sure, why not?" The stagehand went into the audience with slips of paper. People wrote down their favorite Dean Martin songs. "That's Amore," "Everybody Loves Somebody," "Voila," "Memories Are Made of This," all the classics. But one request stood out, "Little Ole Wine Drinker Me." The song nobody expected. Little Ole Wine Drinker Me was a relatively new addition to Dean's repertoire. Written by Dick Jennings and Hank Mills, it had been released as a single in 1967 and had become a moderate hit, reaching number 38 on the charts. It wasn't one of Dean's signature songs, but it fit his persona perfectly, a light-hearted tune about a guy who liked to drink and didn't apologize for it. The song was simple, almost silly. The lyrics were playful. "I'm praying for rain in California so the grapes will grow and they can make more wine." It was the kind of novelty song that could be fun in a nightclub but might seem lightweight on a prestigious Christmas special. When the stagehand handed Dean the request, he raised an eyebrow. "Wine drinker? On a Christmas show?" "That's what they want," the stagehand replied. Dean looked at the audience member who'd made the request, a middle-aged woman sitting in the third row. She waved enthusiastically. Dean smiled and waved back. "Okay," he said to the orchestra leader. "Wine Drinker Me. Key of G." The orchestra leader looked uncertain. "We haven't rehearsed it. Are you sure?" "We'll figure it out," Dean said with his characteristic confidence. "Just follow my lead." What happened next would show why Dean Martin was considered one of the greatest entertainers of his generation. The setup. The commercial break ended. The cameras started rolling. Dean walked to center stage, holding his trademark glass. The audience had no idea they were about to witness something special. To them, this was just another song in a very entertaining evening. "Folks," Dean began, his voice smooth and conversational, "we've got a request here from a lovely lady in the audience. She wants to hear Little Ole Wine Drinker Me." Now, this isn't exactly a Christmas song, but you know what? Wine is involved in Christmas. The three wise men brought wine, didn't they? The audience laughed. Dean had a way of making everything sound reasonable. Or was it gold and frankincense and myrrh? Dean continued, playing up the confusion. "I always get those mixed up. Probably because I've been focusing on the wine part." More laughter. Dean was warming up, establishing the playful mood that would carry the performance. "Anyway," he said, turning to the orchestra, "we're going to do this one for the lady. And I should warn you all, we haven't rehearsed this. So if I forget the words, I'll just make something up. I do that anyway, so you probably won't notice." The orchestra started the introduction. The arrangement was simple: piano, guitar, drums, and a light brass section. Nothing elaborate. Just a straightforward backing for what should have been a straightforward song. But Dean Martin didn't do straightforward. The first verse transformation. As Dean began singing, something magical started happening. The song, which on the record was upbeat and almost comical, took on a different quality. Dean slowed it down slightly, finding pockets of emotion in lyrics that were meant to be light-hearted. "I'm praying for rain in California so the grapes will grow and they can make more wine." The way Dean sang it, it wasn't just a silly line about wanting more wine. It became almost wistful, like a man genuinely hoping for something good to happen. His phrasing was impeccable. He knew exactly when to pause, when to emphasize a word, when to let the orchestra fill the space. The camera operators, following Greg Garrison's shouted instructions from the booth, moved in closer. They could see Dean wasn't just performing, he was interpreting, finding meaning in a novelty song that the songwriters probably never intended. And I'm sitting in a honky in Chicago with a broken heart and a woman on my mind. Dean's voice dropped lower on that line, adding genuine melancholy. Suddenly, this wasn't just a drinking song. It was about loneliness, about using wine to forget pain, about being lost and far from home. The studio audience, which had been chuckling at Dean's introduction, went quiet. They were listening now, really listening. The improvisation begins. Here's where Dean's genius really showed. He didn't just sing the song as written. He started playing with it, adding little asides, changing his phrasing, making it his own. When he got to the chorus, "I'm just a little ole wine drinker me," instead of singing it straight, he made it conversational. He sang it like he was explaining himself to someone, almost apologetically but not quite. Like he was saying, "This is who I am, take it or leave it." Then he did something unexpected. He stopped singing altogether, letting the orchestra continue, and he spoke to the audience. "You know," he said, his timing perfect, "I've been called a lot of things in my career. A crooner, a ladies' man, a member of the Rat Pack. But you know what I really am?" He paused for effect. "Just a guy who likes to sing and have a good time. Is that so wrong?" The audience erupted in applause and laughter. Dean had broken the fourth wall, turned the song into a conversation. This wasn't a performance anymore. It was Dean sharing something real with the people watching. He jumped back into the song, but now it had a different energy. The orchestra, picking up on Dean's mood, adjusted their playing. The piano player added some jazzy runs. The drummer loosened up the rhythm. They were following Dean's lead, improvising along with him. The emotional core. As Dean moved into the second verse, something remarkable happened. His voice, which was always smooth and controlled, took on a raw quality. Not rough, Dean never sang roughly, but honest. Vulnerable. "I came out here to California to try to make it as a singer in a bar." The way he sang that line, you could hear his real history. Dean Martin had struggled for years before making it big. He'd sung in small clubs, worked as a card dealer, boxed for money. The glamorous image everyone saw was built on years of hard work and rejection. "And I spent all I had at the local tavern, now my voice is gone and I don't have a dime." His voice cracked slightly on "Gone," not a mistake, but an intentional choice that added authenticity. Dean was telling his story through someone else's song. The camera caught close-ups of audience members. Some were smiling. Others looked moved, like they were seeing a side of Dean Martin they'd never seen before. Even the crew members, who'd seen Dean perform hundreds of times, were paying attention in a different way. The musical conversation. What made this performance transcendent was the interaction between Dean and the orchestra. In most performances, the singer follows the orchestra. But here, the orchestra was following Dean, responding to his choices in real time. When Dean slowed down a phrase, they slowed with him. When he added a little growl to his voice, the saxophone echoed it. When he paused for what seemed like too long, the piano held the tension until he came back in. Les Brown, the orchestra leader, later said, "That was one of the most challenging and thrilling musical experiences of my career. Dean was conducting us without conducting, if that makes sense. We were having a conversation with him through the music." Dean seemed to sense this too. At one point, he turned to the orchestra and nodded appreciatively while he sang, acknowledging their contribution. It was all part of the spontaneous collaboration that was unfolding. The bridge moment. Then came the bridge, the middle section of the song where the melody and mood typically change. This is where Dean took his biggest risk. Instead of singing the bridge as written, he stopped again. The orchestra kept playing softly underneath, but Dean spoke directly to the camera, directly to the millions of people who would eventually watch this. "You know what's funny?" he said, and his voice was quieter now, more intimate. We all have something that makes us feel better when life gets tough. For some people, it's going to church. For some, it's spending time with family. For me, he raised his glass. It's singing. And yes, occasionally, a glass of wine. But mostly, it's this, connecting with people. Making them smile. Making them forget their troubles for a few minutes. The studio audience was completely silent. This wasn't part of any script. This was Dean Martin being genuinely vulnerable on national television. So thank you, he said simply. Thank you for letting me do this. For letting me be a little Olé wine drinker who somehow gets to make a living doing what he loves. Then, without any fanfare, he jumped back into the song for the final chorus. But now everyone, the audience, the crew, the orchestra, the viewers at home, understood that this wasn't just entertainment. This was art. The final chorus. When Dean came back in for the last chorus, everything changed. The energy shifted from intimate to jubilant. It was like he'd taken everyone on a journey through loneliness and struggle, and now he was bringing them back to joy. I'm just a little Olé wine drinker me. But this time, he sang it with pride instead of apology. He wasn't making excuses for who he was celebrating it. And he invited the audience to celebrate with him. He started conducting the orchestra with his free hand, the one not holding the glass. Big, sweeping gestures that made the brass section swell. He pointed to different sections, bringing them in and out, creating dynamics that hadn't existed in the original arrangement. The drummer picked up the tempo slightly. The bass player added walking notes. The whole thing was becoming bigger, fuller, more alive. The audience connection. Then Dean did something that proved he was a master showman. He walked off the stage, still singing, and went into the audience. The camera operators scrambled to follow him. He sang directly to the woman who'd requested the song. She was crying, actually crying, as Dean Martin serenaded her from 3 feet away. He took her hand, squeezed it gently, and kept singing. Then he moved through the audience, touching hands, making eye contact, bringing different people into the moment. An elderly man, a young couple, a group of teenagers. He made each one feel like he was singing just to them. This wasn't in the show's plan. The producers hadn't approved it. The insurance people would have had a heart attack if they'd known beforehand. But Dean was following his instincts, and his instincts were perfect. The musical climax. As Dean made his way back to the stage, the orchestra built toward a climax. The arranger had written a simple ending, but Les Brown threw that out and followed Dean's energy instead. The brass section went into a full fortissimo. The drums added a roll. Even the violins, which weren't prominent in the original arrangement, came forward with soaring lines. Dean reached the stage and hit the final line with everything he had. His voice, which could be so controlled and smooth, opened up completely. Not shouting, Dean never shouted, but singing with full power and joy. I'm just a little Olé wine drinker me. He held the final note longer than seemed possible, and the orchestra held with him. The tension built and built until finally, Dean cut it off with a dramatic hand gesture. Silence. For one perfect moment, complete silence. The standing ovation. Then the studio audience exploded. People leapt to their feet. The applause was deafening. People were cheering, whistling, shouting Dean's name. But more than that, people were crying. Laughing and crying at the same time. The performance had touched something deeper than entertainment usually reaches. It had been real. Honest. Perfect. Dean just stood there, looking slightly embarrassed by the reaction. He took a sip from his glass, whether it was apple juice or actual wine, nobody knew, and shrugged his signature shrug. That was fun, he said into the microphone, his voice casual as if he hadn't just created television magic. Should we do another one? The audience screamed yes, but the producers were frantically signaling that they were out of time. The special was already running long. They'd have to cut other segments to fit in what Dean had just done. Okay, Dean said, laughing at their enthusiasm. Maybe next time. Merry Christmas, everybody. Behind the scenes reaction. In the control booth, producer Greg Garrison was on the phone with the NBC executives who'd been watching the feed from New York. Did you see that? He kept saying. "Did you see what he just did?" The executives had seen it. They'd seen a performer take a simple song request and turn it into one of the most memorable moments in variety show history. They'd seen why Dean Martin was worth every penny they paid him. The orchestra members were stunned. Les Brown turned to his musicians and said, "In 30 years of doing this, I've never seen anything like that. Dean just conducted us, improvised with us, and made us better than we knew we could be." Even Frank Sinatra, who'd been watching from backstage, was impressed. He walked up to Dean as the audience continued their standing ovation. "Dino," Frank said, using his nickname for Dean, "that was something special." Dean smiled. "It was just a song, Dag." "No," Frank insisted. "That was more than a song. That was you, completely. No mask, no act. Just pure Dean Martin. And it was beautiful." Dean looked uncomfortable with the praise. He always did. "I just followed the music and went with it. That's all." But it wasn't just that. What Dean had done required years of experience, deep musical knowledge, incredible instincts, and the courage to be vulnerable on camera. It was the kind of performance that couldn't be taught or replicated. It could only happen once, in that moment, with that audience, with Dean Martin. The broadcast impact. When the Christmas special aired a week later, the response was overwhelming. NBC's switchboard was flooded with calls. People wanted to know when they could see Dean perform Little Ole Wine Drinker Me again. They wanted to know if there was a recording they could buy. The ratings were massive. The special became one of the highest-rated variety shows of 1967. But more than that, it became a cultural moment. Newspapers wrote articles about Dean's performance. Music critics, who often dismissed Dean as a lightweight crooner, had to acknowledge his artistry. "What Dean Martin did on his Christmas special," wrote one New York Times critic, "was remind us that the best performances can't be manufactured in a recording studio or perfected through endless rehearsals. Sometimes, magic happens when a talented artist simply trusts their instincts and connects with an audience." The recording industry took notice too. Capitol Records rushed to promote the Little Ole Wine Drinker Me single, which climbed back up the charts after the special aired. Dean was asked to perform it on several other TV shows, but he always declined. That performance was special because it was unrehearsed and spontaneous, he told his agent. "If I try to recreate it, it won't be the same. Let's just leave it as a moment in time." What made it work? So what exactly made this performance so special? Musical experts and entertainment historians have analyzed it for decades, and they've identified several key elements. First, authenticity. Dean wasn't performing a character or playing up his drunk playboy image. He was genuinely connecting with the material, finding truth in lyrics that seemed superficial on the surface. Second, technical mastery. Despite making it look effortless, Dean demonstrated incredible vocal control, perfect pitch, impeccable timing, and the ability to adjust his performance in real time based on the orchestra and audience response. Third, courage. Most performers wouldn't dare go off script on a major TV special. They'd stick to the rehearsed plan, afraid of making mistakes. Dean trusted himself enough to improvise, and he had the talent to make it work. Fourth, genuine connection. When Dean went into the audience, when he spoke directly to the camera about his life, he wasn't acting. He was sharing something real. That authenticity is what moved people to tears. Fifth, musical intelligence. Dean understood the song's structure, knew how to build tension and release it, knew when to pull back and when to go big. This came from decades of experience, but also from natural instinct. The lesson for entertainers. What Dean Martin did that night became a masterclass in performance that's still studied today. Music schools show the footage to students as an example of how to interpret a song. Acting classes use it to demonstrate the power of authenticity. Television production courses analyze it to show what spontaneous television can achieve when you trust talented performers. The lesson is clear. Technical perfection isn't the same as artistic excellence. You can have perfect pitch, flawless timing, and a beautiful voice, but if you're not connecting emotionally with the material and the audience, you're just making noise. Dean Martin was far from a perfect singer in the technical sense. His range wasn't as wide as many other vocalists. His vocal technique wasn't as refined as opera singers. But he understood something more important. Music is about communication, not perfection. Singing isn't about hitting all the right notes, Dean once said in an interview. It's about making people feel something. If they feel it, you did your job. If they don't, no amount of technical skill will save you. The lesson about preparation and spontaneity. There's a paradox in Dean's performance that's worth understanding. He appeared completely spontaneous, making it up as he went along. But that spontaneity was only possible because of years of preparation. Dean had sung thousands of songs in his career. He'd performed in every kind of venue imaginable: tiny nightclubs, massive arenas, recording studios, television sets. He'd worked with countless musicians, learned from the best arrangers, studied every aspect of his craft. All of that preparation meant that when the moment came to improvise, he had a deep well of experience to draw from. He knew instinctively what would work because he'd tried everything at some point in his career. This is an important lesson that extends beyond entertainment. In any field, the ability to improvise, to adapt to changing circumstances, to seize unexpected opportunities, comes from thorough preparation. You can't wing it unless you've done the work. Dean Martin made it look like he was just winging it. But he'd spent 30 years preparing for that moment. The personal legacy. Dean Martin passed away on Christmas Day, 1995, 28 years almost to the day after that legendary performance. In the tributes that followed, many people mentioned the Christmas special. It had become part of his legend, a perfect example of what made him special. His daughter Deanna Martin later wrote about that performance in her memoir. "Dad never liked watching himself on TV," she wrote. "He'd get uncomfortable and change the channel. But when that Christmas special aired, he watched the Wine Drinker performance all the way through. When it ended, he just nodded and said, 'That was a good night.'" Coming from Dad, that was the highest praise. Other performers who worked with Dean over the years have spoken about that performance as a turning point in how they understood their craft. "I watched Dean do that," singer Glenn Campbell once said, "and I realized I'd been approaching music all wrong. I was so focused on being perfect that I forgot to be real. Dean showed me that real is better than perfect every time." The universal truth. The story of Dean Martin turning Little Ole Wine Drinker Me into a masterpiece isn't just about one performance on one TV show. It's about the difference between competence and artistry, between performing and connecting, between doing your job and creating something that transcends the moment. We live in a world obsessed with perfection. Auto-tune corrects every pitch. Multiple takes ensure every line is delivered perfectly. Editing software removes every flaw. But in pursuing perfection, we often lose something essential, the human element that makes art meaningful. Dean Martin's performance reminds us that flaws, spontaneity, and genuine emotion are what make performances memorable. Nobody remembers perfect. They remember real. This applies to more than just entertainment. In business, in relationships, in life, we often try so hard to be perfect that we forget to be authentic. We rehearse what we're going to say instead of speaking from the heart. We follow the script instead of trusting our instincts. Dean's lesson is simple. Prepare thoroughly, then trust yourself enough to improvise when the moment calls for it. Be real, even if it means being vulnerable. Connect with people honestly, without hiding behind a perfect facade. The final message. That December night in 1967, a woman in the audience made a simple request. She wanted to hear a song she liked. What she got, what everyone got, was a moment of pure artistry that's still talked about more than 50 years later. Dean Martin could have just sung the song. 3 minutes, hit the notes, move on. Instead, he created something that made people cry, made them laugh, made them feel understood and connected. That's what real talent does. It doesn't just entertain, it touches something deep inside people. It reminds them of what it means to be human. It makes ordinary moments extraordinary. If this story inspired you, if you understand what it means to be authentic and trust your talent, smash that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message about choosing authenticity over perfection. Comment below. What's your favorite Dean Martin performance? Remember, The world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more real people. People who are brave enough to be vulnerable, talented enough to trust their instincts, and generous enough to share their authentic selves with others. Dean Martin showed us how to do that. The greatest performances aren't the ones without mistakes. They're the ones where someone connects so honestly with the material and the audience that technical perfection becomes irrelevant. That's the legacy of Dean Martin. A man who made spontaneity look easy because he'd spent a lifetime preparing for moments that seemed unrehearsed. Rest in peace, Dean Martin. You showed us that a simple song could become a masterpiece when performed with honesty, courage, and heart. That lesson will never get old. Merry Christmas, Dino. That was, indeed, a good night.